Welcome to Shaq's house. Shaq's house. That's our Shaq. You're now in Shaq's house. Welcome to Shaq's house.
Hey, what's going on, Shaq House? It's your boy, the one and only Shaq House here. Hope your past 2 weeks went well. Check this out. Today, we're going to be drinking Irish. That's right. And where's my bottle of Jameson at is what you're probably wondering right now, but we're not going to be actually drinking, no. We're going to be talking about the Cassidy family of Marvel. That's right. The Mutant Cassidy family Crest. All these mutants, they're all related and they're from the old country, Ireland. We got Banshee, Siryn, Black Tom Cassidy. And shout out to my Irish American brethren, but we ain't going to be talking about that today. So sorry, no Mystic River, no Goodwill Hunting, no State of Grace. Nothing like that. For the Cassidy family, we're going to be talking about their family history, their powers, and all the details of what they can do and what they've been through. So check it out. It's about to start. Banshee and Siryn. The Banshee and Siryn are a father-daughter pair of mutants who both possess superhumanly enhanced lungs, throats, and vocal cords which enable them to scream louder and longer than a normal person is capable. They can also modulate the wavelength and frequency of their sonic scream to produce different effects. Apparently, this ability is at least partially psionic and not done solely by the vocal cords. A sonic scream can be directed as a concussive force and modulated to perform other effects such as shattering solid matter, crumbling masonry, and even liquefying solid objects if the effect is sustained long enough at an intense level. By psionically causing the force of a sonic scream to be directed behind them, Sean and Theresa are able to propel themselves through the air and fly as fast as the speed of sound. By projecting a scream to disturb the fluids in someone's inner ear, they can induce unconsciousness, nausea, vomiting, anxiety, or vertigo in others. Banshee has used his power to generate sonic waves and map out his surrounding environment and use sonics to disrupt electronic scanning equipment to make it incapable of properly detecting his presence. He has also cast people into a blank trance-like state for as long as they're in range of his voice. In her early appearances, Siryn used her powers to generate a force bubble of energy around herself and for protection, and to hypnotize others into carrying out her bidding during a battle. Later, she also used her powers to tune into distant noises like a directional microphone and create a sonic masking field which prevented sound waves from being conducted through the air. This created a safe zone bubble where people could talk as loudly as they wanted to and not be overheard. She has also learned how to produce subsonic harmonics in her voice that cause adoration. This compels people to fall deeply in love with her and makes them willing to do whatever she asks. Both Siryn and Banshee possess superhuman hearing, allowing them to still hear properly even over the sound of their own screams, and specially reinforced eardrums that are immune to the harmful effects of loud noises and various ranges of sonic frequencies. Other powers that they have. When bonded with the spirit of variance, the Banshee became the Vox Ignis, the Herald of the Spark. This was a spirit of vengeance like the Ghost Riders, which had evolved to swear off the cyclical nature of revenge in favor of inspiring change. And once transformed, Sean had a flaming skull like the Ghost Rider, but he could also expel astral hellfire and use it to augment the blast of his sonic scream. The Vox Ignis could also animate and direct the chains around his wrists, charging them with hellfire as well. The spirit of variance was sensitive to change, able to sense and track down instances of profound change in his environment. So instead of a penance stare, which reveals a victim's sins and forces them to re-experience them, the Vox Ignis created a scream of change. This scream focused on a change someone was experiencing or about to have experienced, and charted the origins of this change, reflecting the past events which brought it about, and like the Ghost Rider, the Vox Ignis could imbue some of his own power into a quote-unquote steed, though he rarely did so since his host could fly independently. And when bonded to the Morgan, Siryn became a Celtic goddess of death, and like a goddess, she was empowered by worship and could hear and respond to the prayers of her worshippers. She still had her sonic scream, but it was now supernaturally enhanced like a true banshee of Irish myth. The Morgan can also heal afflictions of the body and mind, teleport across great distances, and disassociate into an unkindness of ravens. She knew a variety of curses and enchantments from centuries of practice, and her essence moved between avatars or hosts from time to time. Black Tom Cassidy. Black Tom's mutant power is to bodily generate thermokinetic energy and discharge it as concussive blasts of both heat and intense force. He uses non-conductive organic substances such as wood to channel his power. Black Tom's bioblasts, they alternate between being force beams and heat beams, and his assaults can cause combustion or physical impact and damage depending on how he applies them. After being horribly beaten and wounded in battle by the mutant mercenary known as Cable, Black Tom was put through a surgical procedure that grafted synthetic wood fiber into his wounds, which grew to fill in the damaged and lost portions of his mass, making him a human-wood hybrid. But this had the after effect of giving him a constant internal conduit through which to channel his power blasts, and his mutant energy was apparently amplified as it was now focused through his implants. As time passed, however, the implants seemed to take over Tom's body, converting him into a being that was more plant than man. And after being critically injured in this form, his partner in crime, the Juggernaut, financed an operation to remove the synthetic grafts and return Black Tom to his normal human appearance. Since that time, however, Tom underwent a secondary mutation which transformed him completely into a plant-like being. Black Tom came to exist as nothing more than an astral consciousness inhabiting wood and vegetable matter bodies shaped in his image. In such a state, Tom was capable of mentally manipulating various forms of vegetation, causing roots and vines to rip out from the ground and accelerate their growth with tremendous size and strength. By animating this plant matter, he could form razor-sharp wooden spears, prehensile vines to lift and move objects, and wrap such roots or vines around a person or object and constrict, crushing whatever was in their grasp. He could also inhabit large amounts of wooden mass at once, expanding to gigantic sizes, and any injuries inflicted on his animated frame were negligible so long as he could relocate his mind to any other section of his vegetable mass. After M-Day, Black Tom was restored to his human form, losing most of his secondary mutation. He still retains his bioblasting ability and can still animate and manipulate wood and plant life to some degree. He has even demonstrated enhanced bioblasting, such as channeling massive amounts of energy by conducting his bioblast through multiple logs of wood strapped on the back of a flatbed truck. While his plant-based abilities seem to be mostly gone at first, Black Tom has reconnected his secondary mutation through symbiosis with the living island of Krakoa. When acting with the island in its defense, Tom demonstrated psychometric clairvoyance, a level of constant awareness and movement of activity throughout Krakoa's biomass. This included not only the land itself, but also algae floating in the water and microorganisms in the air in Krakoa. He could physically and mentally merge with the plant matter as before, maintaining his human body, but also casting his mind into plant avatars simultaneously. He rarely left the island, and showed that his plant control powers function equally well away from Krakoa as well. Okay, some fun facts about the Cassidy family. Sean Cassidy holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Dublin College. Formerly an inspector with Interpol and an NYPD detective, he is well versed in law enforcement, armed and unarmed combat, undercover operations, and is a highly skilled investigator. He is an excellent marksman and a competent amateur machinesmith, well versed in combat strategy, tactics, and teamwork drills. He's an effective educator, organizer, and lobbyist, and he's also an avid American country music fan and has voluminous encyclopedic knowledge of the genre and is a skillful piano player. Theresa Rourke Cassidy was a member of Jamie Madrox's X Factor Investigations detective agency, also known as XI, during which time she exhibited a capacity for deductive reasoning and investigative knowledge, making her a highly competent private detective. And running the organization in Madrox's stead, she demonstrated capable leadership as well. Thomas Cassidy was educated at the University of Oxford. He is a master of terrorist strategies and tactics and is a master swordsman as well. Now, all three mutants, their powers are energy-based. Banshee and Siryn, they generate sonic energy, while Tom generates heat energy. And all three mutants, they can use their powers offensively in a variety of ways, while Tom's power requires non-conductive substances like wood to focus his power, and he often uses a shillelagh, an Irish walking stick, as a focus for it. Perhaps those substances give his power more cohesion and direction. Maybe that's why he uses them. Also, it's known that Banshee and Black Tom, despite being first cousins, they share a mutual power immunity similar to the one that exists between the Summers brothers. However, Siryn is not included in that mix, because check this out. During the Muir Island Shadow King saga, she was able to use her sonic scream on her father. But later, a few months later, Black Tom's energy blast, she was susceptible to that. Okay, here's a little bit of family history. Well, not a little bit, but a lot. Ireland's storied Cassidy clan is an ancient and noble lineage, and the family's ancestral home is Cassidy Keep, a fortress-like castle in a remote, sparsely populated coastal area of County Mayo, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean from high atop the granite cliff of Cassidy Crag. The Cassidy's family presence there predates historical records, and Cassidy Keep itself was built by Liam Cassidy over 1,000 years ago to defend the Irish coast against Viking raiders. Born and raised there, Sean Cassidy had a happy boyhood, fantasizing about fighting dragons and rescuing damsels, and during his adolescence, he discovered his mutant power, but hid them, partly because his community likened them to the ghostly banshees of Irish lore. Now, Sean's older cousin, Black Tom Cassidy, became his lifelong rival. And like Sean, Tom was secretly a mutant as well, but Tom was also a gambling man and loved to live dangerously. Tom was next in line to inherit the Cassidy estate and its modest wealth, but gambled away these rights to his cousin Sean in an ill-advised wager. But despite this setback, Tom remained a suave, charming, Oxford-educated ladies' man, often making the less cultured Sean feel like a hapless country bumpkin by comparison. But a wedge grew between the two cousins when Sean brought home a university girl and daredevil motorcyclist named Maeve Rourke. Tom and Sean were equally enchanted with Maeve during her visit, and they both began courting her from that point on. The competition was friendly but serious between the cousins, and Maeve seemed genuinely affectionate towards them both. But ultimately, Maeve chose and married Sean. But having lost the love of his life, Tom turned to a life of crime instead, taking on the nom de guerre, Black Tom. He initially masked his criminal activities under the guise of being a soldier of fortune, and roamed the world offering his services as a gun for hire while continuing to pursue criminal activities. Captured and imprisoned after aiding revolutionary forces in a third world country, Tom met and befriended his best friend, mercenary Cain Marko, aka the Juggernaut. Meanwhile, Sean graduated college with a degree in science and became an agent of the international law enforcement organization Interpol. As an agent of Interpol, he encountered several future villains such as Magneto, Omega Red, and even Deadpool, which makes me wonder just how old Wade Wilson is. While Sean was away, Maeve was killed in an IRA bombing, but not before giving birth to their daughter, Theresa. Unable to contact Sean, Tom looked after Theresa until Sean returned, hoping that learning that he had a daughter might lessen Sean's pain at losing Maeve. But at her gravesite, the devastated Sean attacked Tom for not taking better care of her, before Tom could inform him about his child. Angrily, Tom decided not to tell Sean about Theresa due to his injury and raised her by himself. Sean's grief made him an obsessive workaholic, and he briefly transferred to the New York City Police Department. But still in mourning, he quit Interpol for good and became a freelancer, secretly dabbling in minor crimes until becoming a member of the subversive mutant villain team known as Factor 3, albeit under hypnosis, and became an enemy of the original X-Men as a result. After Factor 3 broke up, Cassidy relocated to Nashville when Charles Xavier recruited Sean and several other international mutants to form a new squad of X-Men to rescue the original X-Men from the living island of Krakoa. Now, Banshee, he briefly considered leaving the team since he felt too old for the mostly youthful group and was an enemy of the original X-Men, but Xavier and team leader Cyclops convinced him to stick around. He saw his teammate Thunderbird die in battle, occasionally assumed an informal role of leadership in the absence of Cyclops and Xavier, and he also began a long-running romance with Xavier's silent partner, geneticist Moira MacTaggart, and clearly, Sean did not know that she was secretly a mutant with reincarnation powers. During battle, Banshee burned out his power against Moses Magnum, lost the use of his voice, and retired, and from then on became an on-again, off-again X-Man. And later, when Charles Xavier created a new youth education program at the Massachusetts Academy, Sean and a newly reformed Emma Frost became co-headmasters of their students, Generation X. When Moira MacTaggart was supposedly killed when Mystique bombed Muir Island, Sean took the news awfully hard and began drinking heavily. This alcoholic downslide, combined with Emma Frost's wavering morality, funding troubles, and other factors, led to the disbanding of the Generation X program. Sean retreated to Ireland shortly after that, but quit drinking and channeled his grief into a new idea, creating and leading the international paramilitary mutant police force known as the X-Corps. Using funds from a forgotten Factor 3 account and various criminal accounts frozen by Interpol, and basing the group in an abandoned AIM facility stocked with highly advanced equipment, Banshee recruited various mutant volunteer adventurers, including his former Generation X students, and pressed other mutant criminals into his service. Mystique was one of them, but she betrayed him. She slit his throat, and after a lengthy hospital stay, Sean went into seclusion, and the remnants of his X-Corps were taken over by Charles Xavier to form the search and rescue X-Corporations around the world. Banshee was later killed by the Summers brother known as Vulcan during the Deadly Genesis limited series, but he was later resurrected on Krakoa. Now Siryn, during her upbringing, Tom sent her to boarding school, where she began experimenting with alcohol, which quickly turned into addiction as she began drinking hard liquor more frequently. After she heard Tom had been jailed, she broke all contact with him. However, at some point in the future, Theresa's mutant powers manifested themselves, and Black Tom and the Juggernaut recruited her to aid them in their crimes. She adopted the codename Siryn and wore a costume provided by Tom that was patterned after Banshee's. They robbed a bank, but were defeated by the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman as well as the X-Men. Feeling guilty about using Theresa, Tom exonerated her of involvement in the crime and released her into the X-Men's custody, and finally informed both Theresa and Sean of one another, leading to a joyous and long overdue meeting with father and daughter. Theresa was also part of the informal mutant group known as the Fallen Angels, where she had a romance with Jamie Madrox, which years later was revealed to be one of his duplicates. Years later, Theresa joined Cable's incarnation of X-Force, where she proved herself to be useful, but she also got to drinking again, had Warpath, James Proudstar, develop feelings for her, which she continuously fended off until he got himself a girlfriend, risque mind you. And Terry later joined Xavier's X-Corporation, and afterwards, Jamie Madrox's X-Factor investigations. During that time, two of Jamie's duplicates separately seduced both Siryn and her teammate Monet St. Croix on the same night, and unaware of this two-timing, Siryn fell in love with Jamie once more, but both women they were furious when he finally confessed his duplicity, so to speak. And additionally, both women were left pregnant with an infant Madrox. And learning of her pregnancy, Siryn reconciled with Jamie. But months later when they moved to Detroit, Siryn went into labor and had a C-section because the baby was being born breached. And following the birth, Siryn proposed to Madrox, who accepted. And when the baby was born, they named him Sean, after Terry's father, who she finally and reluctantly accepted had died. However, when Madrox held Sean for the first time, he unintentionally absorbed the baby into himself, proving that the baby was just a duplicate. A hysterical Siryn attacked Jamie, opening her stitches and requiring further surgery. And while recovering, Siryn calmly broke Madrox's finger and threatened to break his neck the next time she saw him. Afterwards, Madrox subsequently left his own detective agency. And Siryn, now angry and bitter over the loss of her child, continued to serve as leader of XI, but she eventually made it to Krakoa. As mentioned earlier, Tom was on Krakoa as well, and he had a greater role than either of his cousins. Even though the nation-state had foreign relations, it still needed a Black Ops team to perform deniable missions for the protection of mutant kind. This was a new iteration of X-Force, consisting of Wolverine, Kid Omega, and Domino as a strike team for deployment. Now Beast, Marvel Girl, and Sage, they were the intelligence who ran the operations. Forge ran the armory, but Black Tom Cassidy, he was a walking security measure who communed with Krakoa itself. And even though he lost the physical appearance of his secondary mutation, he was still able to bond with the vegetation and extend his mind through plant life, create avatar bodies for himself, and shape and control plants. Now the last part, shaping and controlling plants, that indicates Omega level potential for Black Tom. Here are some thoughts / extra facts. As Banshee, Sean wore a synthetic costume designed to resist air friction, usually including underarm wings that help glide him on air currents and his own sonic waves. Now Siryn, she wore a similar costume with the same Irish gold and green color scheme. Tom Cassidy, he wore a darker costume than that and also used a shillelagh. And he also had darker features than his reddish blonde cousins, indicating that Tom, he might be Black Irish. Also, all three of them have had drinking problems, true to the Irish stereotype. Now Banshee and Siryn, they've always had a good relationship with one another, and Tom, he's the literal black sheep of the family. But during the Krakoan age, all three of them seem to have mended fences. And also, while Black Tom and Siryn have gotten plenty of character development over the years, post-Generation X, Marvel has treated Banshee like shit, frankly. Additionally, and besides these three, there are other very Irish mutants out there. You got Ramrod from the Nasty Boys, who like Tom can also control wood. Liam Connaughton from Muties, who can create uncontrollable explosions. And finally Plasma, who's actually the niece of the living monolith. And also, and I know that some of you may have been asking this question to yourselves, how do Banshee and Siryn compare to characters like Black Bolt and Screaming Mimi? Well, for the latter, Screaming Mimi, she has nano implants that allow her to manipulate sound for an amplified voice, sonic scream, subliminal influence to induce vertigo, sleep, hallucinations, sonar, and even solidify her scream into solid constructs, like wings for flight. And also, it's a common misconception that Black Bolt's power is a sonic scream. Let me just say this right now, it's not. What Black Bolt can do is manipulate electrons, and he derives an enormous array of powers from that alone, all of which can be channeled silently through his body or through the fork in his brow. But the problem is, the energy flow in his body is irrevocably linked to his speech center, causing his power to erupt through his voice uncontrollably whenever he speaks. So he can use his power without speaking, but he just can't speak without using his powers. Alright folks, that's what I got for you this week. Tune in next week, I'm going to be doing two obscure characters, one of which is from the old 90s Darkhawk comic, and the other one's from Alpha Flight. Tune in, and you have a good week. Later!
Mansion, apartment.
Shack, house. Yes!